We're moving forward now in this new chapter by looking at that important component of website creation using CSS, or cascading style sheets to give them their full name. In this lesson, I need to analyze initially what CSS files are and how they work for those people brand new to Dreamweaver. So let me explain. Prior to the comprehensive implementation of CSS into website creation, and by association into Dreamweaver, creating the way a page looks or is styled meant repeatedly writing particular code into the page and across multiple pages if you wanted the same appearance across those multiple pages. Well, it meant writing code into the page to make the look or the style of the page appear as required. However, with the implementation of CSS, it meant that this styling code that gets used across multiple pages, or just within one page, it meant that this code could be made separate from the HTML document. And this CSS code would be part of a simple and small text file, so that whenever any HTML document was loaded, the browser would look at the CSS text file too, and adjust the appearance of the HTML page based on the rules written into the text file. Now, you will appreciate the benefits of this if you have multiple pages that contain the same look or style, because that textual CSS code only has to be downloaded and accessed once. It doesn't have to be part of the HTML page, weighing it down digitally and subsequently slowing down loading times. Now, so far I'm talking about how a CSS file is separate to the HTML file. This isn't always the case. In fact, you'll have probably noticed that the site that we've been creating so far has its CSS written into the HTML document itself. Well, this is known as internal CSS. What I've been talking about in this lesson relates to what's known as external CSS, i.e. an independent file from the HTML document itself. Now, what I'll do to try and make this clearer is create two new HTML documents with some simple text on them, and then with a CSS text file, I'll apply it to the pages so you can see how the CSS file adjusts the style or look of both of these pages. And then by adjusting the CSS file, you'll see how it updates both HTML pages simultaneously. So let's go about the process of creating a couple of HTML documents and having a CSS file, a cascading style sheet, controlling what they look like. First of all then, I'll come over to my Files button here and open it, and then if I right-click on our top level, I can create a new folder. I'm going to call this CSS Pages, and in a moment what's going to be in here are exactly that, a couple of HTML pages that are going to be controlled by a separate CSS file. Now, there are no project files provided for this lesson. I just want you to watch so you understand the concept of the external style sheet. Therefore, first of all, I'm going to create a new HTML document, so I'll do it by clicking on this link here in our Create New column, and there is our untitled number 1 newly created file here within our code view. If I flick over to Design View, then you can see it's exactly that, a brand new empty document. I need to save this, so I'll come up to File and down to Save, and then in my resulting Save As dialog, I'm going to open up this CSS Pages folder that we've just created. Now, in the real world, I would give this a better name than Untitled 1. However, for this example, I am going to leave it at that. So I'll run down here and click on Save. OK, now I'll just close this one down by clicking on its cross there. And I'll do exactly the same process to create another page, this Untitled number 2 page. And now that this is created, I'm going to save this in exactly the same folder, that CSS Pages folder. OK, so there it is, Untitled number 2, and I'll hit Save once more. Right then, I'll close this one down too. And therefore, if I come over to my Files panel once more and click on here to open it, and then navigate to our CSS Pages folder, well, there you can see my two newly created files inside, Untitled 1 and Untitled 2. Now, I'm actually going to open these two again, so I'll double click them both to open them up, because what I'm going to do is create some content for our two pages here, and the content is going to be pretty much identical for both Untitled 1 and Untitled 2. I'll also create what is known as an external style sheet, i.e. it's a CSS file that is distinct from these two files. Whilst I'm doing this, I'll pause our screen recording to save you some time, and once I'm done, I'll come back with those files created. OK, I'm done, I'm back. And if I look in my CSS pages folder now, not only do we see these two untitled pages, 1 and 2, but we also see just above I have a new CSS text file, and I've called it main CSS 2. I could have called this anything. This is just the name I called it. I'll start off by opening up Untitled 1. I'll double click it, and there we go. There's not much content here, but it will suit us for our example. As you can see, it only contains some text within 3 separate divs. We've got our top div, and you can see with the textual content there that the ID for our top div is top, and it has a certain amount of styling there in terms of the font that is being used. And in actual fact, if you come down to the Properties Inspector, then you can see that my ID top is indicated down here too, in this field underneath Div ID. Moving down to our central content area, well, this takes the ID middle, and of course down in our Properties Inspector, well, we see the name there as well. And that takes on some different styling for the text than the top div. And then looking at our bottom div, the one with the ID bottom, well, you can see this takes on some styling as well, and the styling is different to the other 2 divs in that I've made the text italic. Now if I click on my code view, then you can see at this line here, line number 6, out of a possible 24 lines of code, well, we can see at line 6 here that we have this main CSS number 2.css file being linked to. All the code that's inside that CSS file doesn't have to appear here. Consequently, this page is digitally lighter, meaning it will load faster. And just above here, next to our source code, we can see that the related file with this untitled 1 HTML file, well, we see the related file is indicated here, main CSS2.css. And if I select it to open it up, then you can see the actual CSS code written here. And now you can see why that my 3 div content areas take on slightly different looks. On line 4, within the body, we see it takes on that font family. And then at line 6, with our top div, then that takes that family. And at line 8, for our bottom div, well, you can see I've changed the font style there to be italic. I'll just move back over to the source code, and in fact I'll flick on our design view. Okay, so that's why this page looks like this. I'll just close it down, and I'll come over to my Files panel and open up Untitled 2. Well, as you can see here, I have pretty much exactly the same text. However, all the content here is universal, in that it's all the same. And that's only because I haven't got any CSS attached to it. That main CSS2 style sheet that we've just been looking at hasn't been applied here. And we can tell that because there are no related files up here. Therefore, we have no external style sheet controlling what this page looks like. Just to remind you, I'll open up Untitled 1. That's what that looks like with our CSS styling. And if I flick on Untitled 2 again here, then you can see that this page is a little bit more bland. Not that I'm saying Untitled 1 is the most exciting page you'll ever see. I'm just running this by you, simply so that we can pick up this understanding about how external style sheets work. Now, of course, we don't need to create another style sheet if we want this page, Untitled 2, to take on the same styling as our Untitled 1 page. And that's because we've already got that CSS file written. We don't even need a duplicate of it. All we need to do is apply that style sheet to this HTML page. And we do it by coming down to the Properties Inspector and making sure that you are looking at the HTML view. Then here, in your class field, well, it's set to none at the moment. If you click on the drop arrow there, then you'll see a number of options. Well, we want this one, Attach Style Sheet. So by selecting it, this Attach Existing CSS File dialog opens up. Now there are a few different settings here, so just for the moment, whilst we're being introduced to this, leave everything as it is. The only thing we do want to change is that empty field. We want to navigate or browse to that particular CSS file that we've already used. So if I click on the Browse button, and then navigate to the CSS Pages folder, if it doesn't automatically open, well, there is my CSS file, main CSS2. So if I select it, I can then run down and OK this. Right then, so that's now in that field. This is the CSS file we want to attach to our HTML document. So I'm going to leave it set at link so that this HTML document remains independent and reliant on its style in terms of being linked to this CSS file. So leaving all those settings like that, I'll click on OK. And there we go. We didn't have to do anything other than that. my 3 content areas now take on those styles that we've seen already when they were applied to our first page. We have 2 different font families for the 2 top divs, and the bottom div now has its text in italic. And if I go over to our code view, then now at line 6, as we saw with Untitled 1, this Untitled 2 document takes on that link there, linking to our CSS file. Which means, of course, should I adapt or change in any way my CSS file, then because this Untitled 2 page is linking to it, then whatever I change in that CSS file will be automatically updated here within this HTML file. Right then, I'll just do a quick save. I'll run up to File and then down to Save. And that's us done for this lesson, now that we've had a quick run through looking at CSS explained.